Good morning. Whoa, that was loud. That was a little louder than I expected. Good morning. I get the privilege of trying to keep you awake after the biggest party night of the event. Midway through the week, who's tired? The rest of you are lying? Or asleep, one of the two, I don't know. So, I am Jarvis Davis. I am a consultant with CDW, and very excited to be here to share with you kind of a case study of a client. So, one thing I just want to do, kind of set the stage for what this session is and what it is not. This is a case study. So what we're going to be looking at are something that's specific to one client that I worked at this past year. We're going to be looking at their design decisions, their hierarchy, their political landscape, their business requirements, their technical requirements, which may or may not be your business or technical requirements. So don't just assume that anything you see on the screen here is the right decision for your company. It might be, it might not be. So just kind of lay that out as a groundwork. We're going to look at kind of high-level design considerations and key scenarios from this case study hierarchy, from this case study company. I cannot mention the name of the company. They are in the room right now, but other issues going on, I can't mention the name of the company. What you should be trying to take out of this session is the thought process that goes into a 2012 hierarchy design. Examples here may help you, but think through the thought process more than anything. That's what you should be trying to take out. I threw some live demos in. This is a 200 level session. You're getting 3 live demos. Anybody that complains it's not technical enough, I don't know what else I can do for you. So let's kind of move on and go to a kind of a profile of this company. 15,000 clients, so reasonably large. 5 business groups with multiple business units underneath that. They've had historic autonomy amongst the business groups and business units. Equate autonomy with complexity. That's generally a 1-to-1 equation. All right? If you got autonomy, almost guaranteed you're more complex than what you need to be. Historically, they have not had a very strong centralized management. They have had a lot of autonomy. There's been new IT leadership that has stepped in the last year or two here that is mandating strong centralized management and what they term a shared services model amongst all the business groups and business units. Not having each individual group spinning up their own config manager hierarchy or anything like that, have everybody managed from a central standpoint. The company, at least some subsets of the company, different business units, have been using the product since 1.2. Others came on later in the equation, but at least one subset, the person who manages that is actually sitting in the room right now, was managing it back at 1.2. What the different groups were doing varies based on location. Some of them were doing it mainly for inventory and updates. Did very little software distribution and no operating system deployment. Others were much more fluid with what they did. They had a lot of the components of the config manager that they utilized. Some were doing operating system deployment. Some were using Ghost or Altiris or whatever for that. But this shared services model, this mandate from IT leadership, is they were going to move to using config manager for all of that across the environment. Now, I came into the environment to do a health check of their environment, of their 2007 environment. And on the first day of the health check, I opened up their config manager 2007 console and immediately had visions of being on this stage talking about hierarchy simplification. Because this, clicker is not working, this is what I saw. Let that one sink in for a second, okay? I put that up there for shock value alone. Did I need a Visio diagram to finish my health check? No, I did not. But I ran SMS map just in case this session got accepted. So That is a screenshot, actually, so there's no server names or anything in there. But what SMSMAT, which is a VB script that creates a Visio diagram, does, it creates an object in the diagram for every config manager role in the environment, which means it creates a lot of noise for your Visio diagram. So let's pull out all the components of this that are not hierarchy related, and we are left with this. Now, let me describe this. Upper left corner, you have a central primary. You have 23 child primaries. Bottom right corner, you have a grandchild primary. Every yellow dot's a primary. You have 3 grandchild secondaries. Is this thing a little complex? Does autonomy equal complexity? Yes, it does. Now, I'm not sure about you, but if you think about this, we have 25 locations where configuration and settings can be set. How many of those were reasonably close to one another? Exactly. For that matter, think about this. That's 25 SQL databases. That's 25 SQL databases that I got to back up. How many of those sites had successful backups at the time that I showed up? Less than half. Now, here's the deal. This company has a couple of config manager rock stars. The one that's in the room right now is one of the rock stars. They are fantastic at what they do. But config manager is only part of their role. That's not 100% of the job. Who in here has config manager as 100% of your job? Okay, there's like 8 of you. I don't know how many I'm a bad judge of numbers, but I guess we got 200 or 300 in here. 8 of you, it's 100% of your job. It's fairly common, very typical. Have you ever seen a company that had 20 plus config manager rock stars in the same company? No, I've never seen one. If you've got one, I'd love to see your company. I'd love to see your environment. Nobody's got that many rock stars in their environment. Do you want a non-rock star managing stuff, settings, configuration, that could affect the rest of the hierarchy? I don't. I certainly don't. That's the situation they had. Now, some of their sites were fantastically managed. Others looked like they'd hardly been touched. Very different experiences based on where you happen to be sitting in that in this environment. And the company, the rock stars were honestly painfully aware that this was not functional for their environment. They knew this was not the way it should be in their environment. They also knew that because of political considerations, it was going to be challenging to redesign 2007 to fit what it needed to be. So they're going to take the opportunity at 2012 to make those decisions. Now, question. Looking at that, can you just assume that this is a right or a wrong design? No. Is it possible that business requirements exist that would make this a valid design in 2007? As unlikely as it may seem, yes, it's possible. Unlikely, but possible. So let's take a look. One of the questions, this clicker is really not working. One of the questions that I will commonly ask when I go into a company is, what led to the current design? And more than once, the answer has been, hey, don't blame me. I inherited this garbage. How many in here inherited your design? Yeah, more than, I hear laughs, more than half the room inherited the design. Of those who inherited it, how many are happy with it? 2. So, no one's happy with it. You realize that there's challenges. Now, other things that could have led to the design, business requirements. I have certain needs in my environment that require certain settings, certain configurations that are business related, not preferences, but requirements, not a business preference. I've seen a ton of companies, this is why we're doing this, and here's why it's a requirement. All right, let's think that one through. Is that really a requirement, or is that an admin preference? And most of the time, they will capitulate and say, yeah, okay, it's actually a preference. Yeah, I just want it that way. Now, politics. Who does not have politics in their environment? Okay, the CDW folks here on the fifth row, they say that. So thank you guys. But everybody's got politics in their environment. So if you've got political problems that are causing your design to be more complex than what it needs to be, I can help you try to talk through that. But quite honestly, that's internal stuff you've got to deal with. What about, okay, here's a good question. Who in here on the server team has a fantastic relationship with the workstation team? Is it the same team? So, I got a nod yes. I got a nod yes. Who here on the workstation team has a fantastic relationship with the server team if you're not the same team? Yeah, there's always distrust between I got two over here, okay. So there's always a distrust, typically there's a distrust between workstation and server. I don't want your peanut butter in my chocolate. Stay away. And so that is one thing that could lead to design requirements for that. Mergers. Some of the dots on the screen earlier, the primary sites there, were caused by mergers and acquisitions. Matter of fact, that child and grandchild primary down the bottom right corner, that was an acquisition of the parent company. So those are situations that come up. So as we look at our 2012 design, let's start with a couple of kind of design criteria that will guide our overall process. As you do your 2012 design, you need to have a vision in mind. You need to have a picture of where you want to get to. And so I've got two overarching design principles that I want to talk about because that's going to guide the rest of our design. Primarily, the first one is we want to keep your design as simple as possible. Let's not have complexity just for the sake of complexity. Does a central administration site look cool? Heck yes, it does. Is it required in your environment? For most of you, I'd say probably not. Do multiple primaries look cool? Yes, they do. Unless there's a business or technical requirement, save yourself the heartache. If you can do a single primary, do a single primary. If you don't need a second, you're good there. Now, that kind of leads us into the next one, which is, let's make it, all right, this is problematic here. Am I walking too far away from it? There we go, complex is necessary. So as simple as possible, as complex as necessary. The complexity should come from either a technical or a business requirement. Technical requirement. Do you have more than 100,000 clients? Anybody in here have more than 100,000? I see more hands than I expected. About 6 or 8 of you have more than 100,000. All right? There's a technical requirement. A primary site can only have a single or a primary site can only handle 100,000 clients. If you're at or expect to be above 100,000, that justifies a second primary. For the majority of you, that's not the case. I know the demographics of this event is about 40% of you are under 50,000 or in the 25 to 50,000 range. So, for the majority of you, that is not one of the issues. If you've got certain other technical requirements, if you've got some business requirements, those are some reasons why you might want to be, you might need to add complexity. So along with the overarching design principles, we have a couple of considerations that we want to look at that could affect our design. And these are around the technical and business requirements. So on the technical side, we need to look at what are the available features of our sites and roles in 2012. We've had a lot of changes there about what you can do with a 2012 design, in a 2012 site or role that you could not do in 2007. Another issue you got to look at from a technical side is what's the supported client count? Okay, how many clients can a DP handle? How many clients can a primary site handle? How many clients can a secondary site handle? Those are things that we need to take into account. Your WAN. Nobody wants to be the one who gets a call from the network team saying, what are you doing pushing this thing to Dubuque? Because that's a T1 line, you're pushing a 4 gig image. All right, you just killed them. Nobody wants to be that guy or that gal. On the business side, which features are we going to offer at which locations? That's actually what we're going to talk about in the next slide. Administrative segregation and delegation, the whole workstation server fight between those two groups. Differing client settings. This is one, I've got a demo on this one as well. This is one that could affect your design if you have requirements around having different client settings. In 2007, it's different in 2012. And then regulatory compliance. You got HIPAA, you got SOX, you got international considerations to take into effect. Those could have an impact on our design. And so let's talk about the features and locations. Which features of Config Manager are you going to use at a given site? So inventory is kind of a given. Generally, I see the reason that Config Manager comes in to a lot of companies is because of the need to do your Patch Tuesday process. App installations, the 800-pound gorilla, operating system deployment. If you can do OSD to location, you can do dang near anything else. So think about the where. Are we going to do, let's take our 800-pound gorilla. Are we going to do operating system deployment only at our headquarters location? If that's the case, that has a different impact than if we want to do it at every desktop at every remote site. If all we're doing at the end of this T1 WAN pipe is inventory, then that design is going to look very different than if we're needing to do operating system deployment at the desktop at the end of that T1 line. So those are some things about the features and locations. And so, clicker. So at my client, the one that this case study is about, one of their key requirements was they wanted to do operating system deployment at the desktop at any location that had more than 30 clients. Additionally, if a site, a location, had historically had a Config Manager site server, they were not going to take a server out of that location. They were going to move a 2012 server into that location as well. So even if that location had less than 30, it was still going to get at least a distribution point. Now, if they want to do a Pixie boot at those locations to do operating system deployment, that distribution point must also be a server operating system. Because with 2012, you can have Vista or 7 be a distribution point, but it does not support Pixie. It has to be a server OS to support Pixie. So those were some of the key requirements around operating system deployment at this location. That required adding certain site servers at certain locations to take that requirement into play. Now, another question around the 2012 capabilities and features. There's some new features, new capabilities of 2012 that will have an impact on our design. Custom client settings, something we did not have in 2007. Next slide is going to talk about that. Role-based access control. This is freaking huge. This is going to be what is going to simplify the majority of your designs. This alone. I've got a fairly long demo on this one. Central administration site, new to 2012. It is not the same as a central site in 2007. Very, very different. Do you need it? Do you not? We're going to talk through that. Distribution point scheduling and throttling. Again, a very exciting thing. First time I mentioned this to my wife, I talked to her over dinner. I mentioned, okay, DPs can do scheduling and throttling. She's like, well, that's not very nice. You're scheduling the throttling of the DP. Okay, 3 laughs. I didn't expect much. I groaned when she said it too. So, but I'm trying to keep you awake. I told you, awake and entertained on Thursday. That's good. Branch cache is a new one. Boundary groups can have an impact on your design as well. And so let's take a look at our custom client settings. So in 2007, where were client settings set? What's that? Primary site level. That's my only place. So if I have a business requirement around differing client settings, that necessitated having a second primary site. I've seen more than one client that had a second site primarily because the server team wanted different client settings than what the workstation team did. Or they needed different settings for your HR and executives than you did for the rest of the masses. So new to 2012 are custom client settings. You have your default settings that you set for the majority of your environment, but then at the collection level, I can set custom settings that will override any of those. I have ordering around those where I can have different settings that will affect various groups of computers and users based on that. Essentially, multiple sites are no longer required in order to have custom client settings, which leads us to our first demo. So this is my 2008 demo environment on my laptop, and we're going to do an example scenario here of special client settings for our HR department. For most of our computers, we want our help desk to be able to do remote control without the user being prompted. They need help, they're away at lunch, get straight in, get your job done, get out. But for our HR folks, we're a little concerned. We don't know what they may have on their screen. Confidential information on the screen. We don't want the help desk to be able to do that without the HR user giving permission to view the screen. So we're going to come in here. We have our default settings. And under Remote Tools, you'll see that we have Prompt User for Remote... Oops, wrong one. Prompt user for remote control permission set to false. Go right on in. I don't care. So that's our default settings. We're going to set up a custom client device setting. And we're going to name this custom settings for HR computers. I already have an OU that has one of my HR computers in that OU. I've got a collection based on that, so I can target that one. Remote tools, and I'm going to come in here. I'm leaving the rest of it default. The only thing I'm modifying here is my remote tools for this thing. So come in here to remote tools, and I simply change prompt user for remote control permission to true instead. So if you can see that. All right. Hit OK. I now have my custom settings for HR computers, and I'm going to deploy that to a device collection, which is my human resources computer, which has a total of 1 member. Nice thing is, we know exactly how many this is going to affect when we do it. Love that new feature of 2012. I had a client, not client. I told the story before. Group in Minnesota that accidentally deployed their Windows XP task sequence to all systems. All systems included domain controllers. They very effectively bricked their entire network. Had they had that count column, they would have hopefully seen that before they did it. So, only in education do you still have a job after that. So now that we've got that setting put in place, we have that going, we're going to now switch over to our HR computer. And we're going to kick machine policy off. And what I should have done is actually showed you that it was that I was limited there beforehand, but I forgot to. Trust me on that. You could have gotten straight in beforehand. So now I'm going to come up to Assets and Compliance. I'm going to go to my HR Computers collection, HR Computer, Remote Control, pops up. Connecting to the host session, asking the remote control user to allow remote control, switch over to HR, approve or deny. That's all I had to do. I don't need a second primary for this. I can just do that. Is that cool? Could that help simplify some of your hierarchies? I got at least one nod over here. This is cool stuff. So now let me flip back to here, and I'm in. Now I'm going to close them out, and we're good to go. Now, for my next demo, I actually need to delete that policy because I need that computer. That's actually the only computer that I can modify in my demo environment, so I need to delete that policy now. Anybody wants to see it later, it obviously takes 30 seconds to set up. I'd be glad to show it to you. So that is my custom client settings. I don't need another primary site for that. So now let's take a look. That was weird. Oh, where am I at? Yeah. Kind of had a mind of its own there. So who in here has systems that you're not allowed to touch? I can't mess with these systems except maybe during special times, a day, or only certain people can touch them. Everybody's got that. Everybody's got certain systems that you got a very tight control around. Well, my client here, they had an interesting little situation. Their systems that they're not allowed to touch mix explosive materials. You don't want these suckers going haywire. Arizona ceases to exist if these things get messed up. So they have a very, very, honestly, somebody could die. If somebody messes those systems, somebody could die because they're sitting next to the vat of explosives. So what we've got in their situation, there were some primary sites that were tied to that need to have separate segregation for those systems. There were some primary sites that one of the reasons they existed was around that primary site delegation. In 2007, you can do administrative delegation. It's challenging at best. I know, so Brian Mason of Wells Fargo, he and I have had good conversations around this. They've done it there. They jumped through a lot of hoops to make it happen. It's possible. It ain't easy. With role-based access control in 2012, this pretty much solves the issue. We can, for most situations, we can separate it out to where this is no longer a reason to have a separate primary for that situation. In my client design, in 2007, I said they had a lot of extraneous primary sites for this reason. In 2012, most of those locations are going to be handled by a simple distribution point. There's a couple of secondaries in there, but I don't think any of those are for this reason. It wouldn't help anyway. But all those, we don't have any extra primary sites because of this reason. So that leads us to demo number 2. And so now, kind of some ground rules here. I already have users in Active Directory that exist. They're already in groups. I already have some collections for workstations and servers set up. I already have some security scopes set up. The demo would have taken too long if I didn't set some of those things up ahead of time. If you would like to see it later, I'd be glad to show it to you after the session. So let's just take a look. We have security roles. We have 14 security roles. We're going to be utilizing those security roles. You can do custom roles if you would like. My recommendation is see if these will work for you. If not, then you can customize more later. But if you can, make the built-in roles work for you. Security scopes, I have the help desk team and the server team scopes. They are set up with, they've been given access to certain securable objects in 2012 that were tied to the roles that we're going to give these users. And so let's go in and create a new administrative user. And we're going to do server admins group. And this takes a few minutes for some reason, every time. We're going to add certain roles for this guy, and we're going to give him operating system deployment and software updates. That's the only roles he's going to be able to do. And then we're going to come down here to the bottom. We're going to remove the default scopes and add the server team scope that we've created. And we're going to add a collection, a device collection, for all servers, which includes 2 systems. So what we've done here is we've said this group, if they open the console, they can only see stuff related to operating system deployment, software updates for servers, period. That's all they can see. And now we're going to come over here, add the help desk. Oh, there we go. And we're going to give the help desk remote tools and what did I say? Deploy applications. Application deployment manager. So only thing they can do is applications and do a remote tool session. We're again going to come in here, remove the defaults, add in a security scope of the help desk team, add in a collection, device collection. Again, note user collections, device collections. Collections cannot contain both users and computers, one or the other. So device collections, we're going to choose the all Windows 7 systems. So all they can do is deploy apps, do remote tools on Windows 7 systems. That's all they can do. And so now we're going to flip over here to our client system that I should have logged out of earlier. And we're going to log in as the help desk guy. And so we log in as the help desk guy. It would help if I didn't fat finger the password. Ball hockey. Okay, I apologize. Not help desk. Sorry. I am putting in the wrong name. Desktop. That's the kind of thing that makes a presenter sweat. So a background like that may be why the server guy doesn't trust the desktop guy. I wouldn't trust the guy. So, but regardless, that's what he chose. Why did they include that as part of the Windows 7 default wallpaper? I don't know. But there you have it. So we're going to open up the Config Manager console as our desktop guy. And once it comes up, what we're going to see is he cannot see any users. The only devices he can see are Windows 7 systems. If he goes to device collections, the only thing he can see is all Windows 7 systems. Only collection he can even see. Doesn't even know the rest of them exist. He doesn't need to. We don't want to mess with it. He doesn't have any reason to see it. Go to software library. All he sees is app management. He does not see software updates. He does not see operating system deployment. He sees none of that. He only sees what we've given him access to. And here, if we go to packages, he sees Audacity, my favorite little demo app. He also sees our applications that we set up, but that's all he sees. Only thing he can see is stuff related to that. If we go over to our devices, he can kick remote control. Except that I've done something a little weird there. So, okay, I did this 5 times last night, never had that issue. So, One of the things about a live demo, something's guaranteed to screw up. So, but everything's going good so far, other than that. Now, let's now log out of this guy. Close our console. Lovely screen. And now, let's log in as the server guy. Now, his background is black, maybe like his heart, maybe the reason the desktop guy doesn't trust the server guy. But when he comes over here, he opens up the console. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep you entertained. If I can keep you laughing, we're doing good. When he looks at devices, he sees a couple of servers. He sees the DP in my demo server. He does not see any users at all. Go into software library. He can see operating system deployment stuff. He can see our images. He can see our boot images. Except apparently I didn't put that as part of the security scope. So again, security scope, so this might be a good thing to show. So I can come in here to security. Actually, flip over to where I have full rights. And I can go to the boot images, select them all, set security scope, add the server team to this, and now when I flip back over to here, go to boot images, he can now see them. Simple as that. It's live. He doesn't have to log out, log back in. It's live on the fly. So we can do all that natively. So with that said, this guy can only see what we give him access to. Does this solve your workstation server team distrust? This can simplify your hierarchy big time. Now, one argument someone may say, someone still has to have God rights. All right? Someone does. Now, how can you solve that? You have a group that has God rights. Nobody is in the group by normal day-to-day operations. If they're doing something that requires management of the entire hierarchy, you go through your change control process, you have your settings put in place, put me in, let me do the job, get me back out. That could also solve your problems. So yes, there are still some things that you'll need to watch out for there, but I believe it is totally solvable. So now, let's come back over here. One of the aspects about this setup here is that they do not have speaker notes on this monitor here. So I am, that's the reason you see me shuffling paper over here. So let's take a look now at some of our other design options. We've kind of solved two of your biggest blockers to simplification with the client settings, role-based access control. Now let's take a look at what are some reasons why you would add complexity in. And so let's look at kind of what are the reasons why you would or would not need a CAS or a primary site or a secondary site or a DP, things of that nature. So let's look at the CAS first. What's the purpose of a CAS? It is only used for administration and reporting. No clients are assigned to the CAS, and it must be installed first in the hierarchy. If you're ever going to have a CAS, it's got to be the first one. So plan well. If you don't, you're going to be reinstalling. You cannot attach a primary to a CAS after installation. So if you think you're going to need one eventually, next 5 years, I was having a conversation with someone last night that was asking that question. They were thinking, okay, we're going to be above the 100,000 mark in probably 5 years. Okay, maybe you do, maybe you don't. There's probably another version of Config Manager by then. Do you want to just redesign then instead? Or maybe they'll add that feature later. I don't know. But party line is that ain't going to happen anytime soon. So when do I need a CAS? If there's more than one primary site in the hierarchy. or to offload administration and reporting from the primary. So, think about the reporting aspect. Is there another way that I could offload reporting? My client had a requirement. They reported very heavy reporting load on their current 2007 hierarchy. All right, let's take that into account. Is there another way that I can solve that reporting aspect? Heck yeah. Another site server that only has the reporting role. Do I have to have a CAS just for the reporting thing? Nope. So one of the ways you could look at it is, if I need a second primary site, might be when I need a CAS. There may be other reasons. So now let's take a look at what are the requirements for a primary site. What would make us have a second primary site? You got to have one. Clients have to be assigned to primary. Clients cannot be assigned to a CAS. They can only be assigned to a primary. So I got to have one. So when do I need more than one? For the 5 of you that had more than 100,000 clients, all right? That's a technical requirement. If you're that scale, you need a second primary. Politics. I've already mentioned politics before. If you got political problems, I can only help you so much. Solve the politics. If you have an issue around regulation of content, i.e. you have international site considerations, there's some countries where you have to have an administrator in that country that has control over all the data going out or management of the systems in that country. That may be a technical requirement around regulation of content that would require a second primary site, even if you're under 100,000. So, for my client, their total client count is 15,000. They do not expect any significant increase in the client count. So they're nowhere close to 100,000. They don't expect to go anywhere near there. There's no need for a second primary in their situation. And so we're going to go with no CAS and a single primary. Again, coming back to our mantra, keep it simple. What's the simplest architecture you can have in 2012? Single primary server, period. That's the simplest you can get. All right, so that's our first part of our simple thing, single primary. Now, what about secondaries? What is the purpose of a secondary? To manage the transfer of deployment content and client data across a low bandwidth connection. That's directly out of the documentation. So, what other things can I do around managing the deployment of content? Well, we got some new features on the distribution points we're going to talk about in the next slide that's going to help us to where we may not need a secondary just for that purpose. So primarily, we're looking at managing the upward flow of client data, that combination of client count and WAN speed that may cause us to need a secondary site if we're concerned about affecting that WAN connection. The other aspect is we have tiered content routing down below. That would be a reason for a second primary. So other content management options include a distribution point, which again can be a server OS or a client OS. The scheduling and throttling of that makes it something that we can utilize in a situation where in 2007 we may have had to use a secondary site or, God forbid, a branch distribution point. I hate those things. Got nods here. Very few people like branch DPs. I would much rather have a secondary than a branch DP. But with 2012, I can do a DP that does not require that. We can do branch cache as well. Now, in your DPs, be aware, if you want Pixie, it has to be a server OS. If you want multicast, according to the documentation, it has to be server 2008 R2. I heard a presenter yesterday, a Microsoft presenter yesterday, say that it was 64-bit server 2008 would also do it. I don't have verification of that, so I'm going by what the documentation said up here. So now, demo number 3. I actually love the fact that I have a 200-level session with 3 demos. So let's take a look at our administration tab. come to our sites and servers, DP, properties, and you'll note that there's a schedule tab here. And it's as simple as, let's say, Monday from 6 a.m. to Friday at 6 p.m., 6 to 18. We're going to say you are only available for high priority traffic. That was simple. Rate limits between 6 and 18. You can use 20% of the available bandwidth. I'm done. Yes? Someone there said it still does. I don't know, honestly. So I'll go with what he said. So the question for anybody else said was, in 2007, this would limit you to one thread. And the gentleman over here in the middle said, yes, he thinks it still does in 2012. Offhand, I don't know. What's that? Yes. I've had multiple clients that say, I don't want to do scheduling and throttling. I got QoS. All right. You got QoS, knock your stuff out. I'm not a network guy. So I go with what the tools I have at hand. If you got QoS set up on your routers, fantastic. Absolutely. So was that good? Was that simple? Will that help you? Are you asleep? Throttling only works one way, he says. Yes. What's that? Correct. So this is, if you're still concerned about the upward flow, that's where the secondary comes in. This is only downward. Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. And now, it varies based, so the question was, do I know the percentage of traffic that goes up versus down? It depends on what you're pushing. If you got OSD images, you got a heck of a lot going down. And depending on your frequency of inventory, things of that nature, what you're inventorying, that's going to have the impact on what goes up. So it all depends on what those settings are. What's that? Any guesstimate based upon defaults. There is a blog post out there that I have seen that if you would like, I can get that to you. I can post it on my blog that does have base information around that. I do not have it handy right now, though. Okay. So I will post, if you have questions, ping me on my blog, which is verbalprocessor.com, and I will try to post answers to those questions after the session. So let's talk about SQL, standard or enterprise. I had a very entertaining conversation with DC Hardy, who is the infrastructure guy at Microsoft around this, and I asked him specifically about this because I had this in my deck. I was like, this is what I think. Can you confirm this for me? Because I think conflicting information out there in the pre-release documentation versus what I've seen on the forums. And he confirmed that this is what is valid. You need SQL Enterprise only on a CAS and if the hierarchy is more than 50,000 clients. You never need it on a standalone primary. You can still support 100,000 clients on a standalone primary. One note, someone out here is thinking, well, I can install a SQL standard and then upgrade to enterprise later. Yes, you can. However, the problem is this limitation comes as a result of the partitioning of the database at install time. That partitioning is based on standard enterprise. You upgrade the SQL version, yep, you got enterprise. You still got the same partition in that database. You still got 50,000 limit. So, question, yes? How does the licensing work? Talk to me afterwards. I got licensing guys right over here that can answer that question. So it's nice working for the company that sells the product, sells the licensing, and installs it. So I got the guy right here in the fifth row that can answer that question for you. So standalone primary can't support 100,000 client on SQL Standard. In my company profile, total client count is never, ever expected to approach 50,000. They also do not have a CAS, which means they are going to use SQL Standard. All right? Moving along, if the clicker will work. Now, one of the key questions we have to answer is around our WAN versus client count versus features. We have a feature set that we're going to deploy. Inventory, software distribution, updates, operating system deployment. We've got locations across a WAN pipe that we're going to do this to of varying sizes. We've got to figure out what we're going to offer at which location versus that WAN count and then plan accordingly. So at my client count, they have a number of sites. They have 7 locations that are fantastically connected. 100 to 300 meg WAN pipe. Wow, that's awesome. A lot of DS3s, so 45 meg. We have some 6 meg T1s, and then a number of unknown, but they're DSL cables. So they're probably in the 6 meg range, probably. And so those are all connected via MPLS back to the main network. So let's take a look at one area in their environment. All location names, by the way, have been changed. They are at none of these locations. They have a main data center, which is where their primary site is. Client count is 3,500 there. Connected to that, they have 3 locations, Dallas, Denton, and Fort Worth, that have medium, fairly high client count, 500, 750, 1,300, WAN sizes of 200 and greater. So they're very, very well connected. Essentially, Ethernet speed, LAN speed across their WAN pipe. Nice to work there. In this situation, we're going to have a distribution point at each location. We're not concerned about upward flow at all in this situation. They're going to have a DP at each location, and we're going to have a content location boundary group. So boundary groups can be for site assignment or content location. We're going to have a content location boundary group around all 4 locations. Those DPs can serve as a failover between each of the 4 sites. DP goes down in one, they can still get content from another. So that's where boundary groups can also help you in, or can have an impact on your hierarchy design. Next one. We're going to move through these fairly fast. If you have questions about these, we can talk afterwards or whatever. So we have a medium fast WAN with a medium client count. So we have, again, the primary site location. We have Jackson, Mississippi, close to where I used to live, and Orlando, Florida, also where I used to live. Client count, 500 to 150. So 150 over a 6 meg link, 500 over a DS3. So reasonable. Not terrible. Not terrible. How are we going to handle that one? Clicker. Again, with that combination of client count and WAN pipe, I'm not overly concerned about the upward flow of client data there. So I don't think it justifies a secondary site for those. We're just using a DP at those locations. That combination of client count, WAN speed, what we're doing there doesn't necessarily justify that. All right, here's another one. We have a small WAN compared to the client count. So 500 clients over 6 meg link, and we have 750 over a 6 meg link. So this is actually a fairly typical situation at this environment. To a certain extent, it wasn't all that big, but it was. We had a few locations like this. In these situations, we were concerned about that upward flow, the combination of the number of clients versus the size of the pipe and the utilization of the pipe. We were concerned about that upward flow. We made these secondary sites in this situation. Yes. Yes, that was the other information I gave there, which was the combination of the client count and the speed and the utilization of that WAN pipe. So I got another one that's going to take your question into account. Okay, I think it may be the next one. Yeah, this one. We have a small WAN, T1, also a small client count. We only got 50 people at this location. fairly typical. Okay, we can do this with a DP, right? Except that the client has reported that this link is already saturated. Business traffic is already making this a problem. Oh, and Tuscaloosa happens to be a call center. And it's a call center over VoIP, over a T1. Seriously? Come on. So obviously the client's got some pretty strong concerns about the upward flow making their VoIP issues worse. So 2 recommendations here. Primarily, fix the honking bandwidth problem. Get a bigger pipe. You've already got VoIP issues at a call center, for crying out loud. Fix the VoIP issues. Then we can manage that with a DP. Until then, we can make the location a secondary site to help manage that. Although, quite honestly, the biggest recommendation here is fix the WAN pipe. Because that's a concern, aside from anything in Config Manager, that is a concern that is having a direct impact on the situation already. All right, one more. We have a special location. The customer criteria for a local server was 30 clients will get at least a DP to support OSD on location. We have a special location. There's only 17 users. They have a 100 meg WAN pipe. Why? Call it out. DP sits there, executives at that location. That's exactly what's going on. So, let's just say the company has a vested interest in making sure this location is very, very happy. So, the design decision was, yeah, there are only 17, but doggone it, they're getting a DP with Pixie. So, you keep the right people happy, you're gonna have a little bit better job satisfaction. So, remember back to our 2007 hierarchy. It's kind of ugly, right? 25 SQL databases, 25 locations, 25 primary sites, management all over the board. What does our 2012 hierarchy look like? We have a single primary site. We have 7 secondaries. Bottom right corner, we got 33 distribution points. I don't have as many moving parts here. I don't want moving parts. I want my hierarchy to be, again, as simple as possible, as complex as necessary. So that was the minimum complexity that I and the client felt comfortable with. There were a lot of other decisions that went into some of these things around those different locations. Some of it tied to the business data going across the connections that the gentleman in the middle there asked about. But that was the design that we ended up with. So, what does this mean for you? Keep that mantra in mind. Simple as possible, complex as necessary. Don't just copy your existing 2007 hierarchy. Quite honestly, even if you're just a single site, maybe you do need a secondary site that you've never put in place. Think it through, plan it, design it from scratch. Plan some more. Look at your hierarchy, look at the server placement, look at the roles and scopes, look at the features and considerations of 2012. Think about what you can do with it, but still, keep it as simple as you can. For other resources, we have a couple of these have already taken place. View the webcast of them. I think the bottom one, the 2 instructor-led labs there at the bottom are both Wally Mead. One of them is right after this session. You can go to that. I put my blog up there, Verbal Processor. I'm also on Twitter at Verbal Processor. That is our deck. Fill out evals if you liked the presentation. If you did not, please stay away from the eval station. And if you have questions, come on up.